Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I just got back from another trip to Michigan to do some filming for the Whitmer hoax documentary. I feel like that went very well. Of course, it was very expensive and basically drained all of my money, but I think it was definitely worth it, and I'm so excited to share that with you guys, and we are getting so much closer. And I'm still, getting readjusted after being gone for 5 days. And these trips are always very like draining for me. And of course, I have to take all of the equipment and then have to put everything back. So I'm still not even done unpacking and getting my equipment put back. But I wanted to do a video for you guys. I wanted to cover the work of a fellow kind of parapolitics conspiracy researcher out there, who kind of was in some of the circles that we were in online, touching on similar topics. I know I've shared some of his stuff before, especially his work on Sandy Hook and Adam Lanza, which I think is fascinating and very interesting. You guys are probably familiar with Jolyon Claybold. He went by Not That Guy on X. Now, it's a really weird story. So I never knew his real identity. I just knew him as Jolyon Claybold online. But apparently, this guy, this researcher, was involved in an incident in 2022 where it looks like he yeeted somebody, but in self-defense, allegedly, and he is now serving life in prison. So I have no idea how long his X account is going to be up. You never know, especially when these things become inactive. And so I wanted to document some of his research in the event that it disappears. So we're going to start with this thread, but we're going to go over multiple threads. Bear in mind, of course, that this is just one researcher's theories and speculation about what happened, but I found value in it because he was tying this to Dave McGowan's Program to Kill, to Gladio, to PATCON, to confidential informants, and I hadn't seen anybody else that covered this event make those connections. So settle in, because this is going to be very long, probably over an hour long, but I think you will find it interesting and worth it, hopefully. So this is his first thread about the theory of what happened that day. He says, no matter where you stand, whether you believe the official narrative of what happened that day, or you think the entire thing was a hoax or something in the middle of that, what is undeniable is just the overall strangeness of the event itself. And I remember there was a lot of weird things about this. One thing I remember was the video of the firehouse where they were taking people, and it looked like the same people were just cycling in and out of this firehouse. It was bizarre. I think we all remember Gene Rosen and his very strange behavior that day. Of course, the check-in sign behind him. And the whole thing was strange. So he says, let's just get straight to the point. A few days leading up to the event, Nancy Lanza took a vacation to Bretton Woods. She checked herself out on December 13th. That was the day before the event. And it's interesting because there were several websites who were listing the day of death of Adam Lanza as December 13th, when the event itself took place the next day on the 14th. So just very odd. It's 290 miles, nearly a 5-hour drive between Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and Newtown, Connecticut. Nancy had visited Bretton Woods before. She'd always driven herself there. She was talking to her friends while she was on her vacation. She appeared to be in good spirits. And apparently, she often took these little vacations by herself, and she was okay leaving Adam alone despite, all of his issues. She just didn't want him cooking, so she would do like meal prepping for him before she went on these trips. She messaged her friend, who many researchers suspected she was having a romantic relationship with. So, side note, who was she meeting with in Bretton Woods? Like, why did she go there? Did she meet somebody there? Who was that person? I think these are pretty important questions. So, anyway, she's in New Hampshire. This is right before the event. She's talking to this guy who she may be in a romantic relationship with about a couple that she met while she's eating dinner who have tattoos. He believes that this couple was involved in the event. This is coming from the Columbian. It was Wednesday night, December 12, 2012. This is 36 hours before Adam's rampage. She sent a Facebook message from the fancy dining room to Berquist. This is the gentleman that she's possibly dating, basically. In it, Nancy describes how she's sitting next to a finely dressed couple that have tattoos poking out of their evening wear. She writes, a shimmery evening dress looks less formal with daggers and skulls peeking out. So the woman who she was eating dinner with of the couple has daggers and skull tattoos. That's kind of interesting. Be forewarned, she added, tattoo girl has talked me into a dragon tattoo. So that's interesting. That's just 2 days before. Now, the father, Peter Lanza, worked at GE Financial. He says, it is my theory he was involved in one of the biggest financial conspiracies, and he either flipped on some higher ups, maybe, or he flipped to save his own skin. Who knows? And he links an article from October 18, 2012. 3 ex-GE bankers sent to prison for rigging muni bids. That's interesting. GE Capital is the financial services unit of Fairfield, Connecticut-based GE. And recall also that Peter Lanza was supposed to testify in the LIBOR scandal, and so also was the father of James Holmes, the Aurora shooter. So there's very interesting connections there. Now, he speculates that the Lanza family were put into some kind of like witness protection program. He says this would explain why they all fall off the face of the earth around 2009, why none of the neighbors really knew Nancy or Adam, and why the father, Peter, hadn't seen his son Adam in 2 years. Now, there's some other weird parts of that as well. I mean, Adam stopped talking to his mom while they lived in the house. He would only communicate with her like by email. So I don't know. But it's possible, right? It's an interesting thing to consider. He says, and how when they found Peter Lanza, he was able to disappear after his identity was compromised. This from Daily Mail pictured Adam Lanza's father and new wife, as it's revealed, couple fled their home and haven't been back since the massacre. That's a little bit strange. Peter was informed by a news reporter who was waiting outside his house that his son was involved in the shooting, said a neighbor who has known Shelley for over a decade. After news crews descended on their house, they calmly packed their bags and drove off, and we've not seen them since. Huh. Kind of strange, isn't it? This would also explain how there was no registration for any firearms under Nancy Lanza, her interest in heavy firepower and self-defense. So Nancy was described as somebody who was kind of like a doomsday prepper, right? She had a lot of guns. She would go to the range. She'd take her sons shooting with her. And for a middle-aged woman, that kind of is a strange hobby that one would have. It seems like maybe there's more to the story there. The AP reports Lanza drove to the school in his mother's car. Police found 3 guns at the scene, a .223 caliber rifle and Glocks and Sig Sauer pistols. NBC News reports that a rifle used in the shooting and 2 pistols were legally purchased and registered to the gunman's mother, Nancy Lanza. But in a public record search, we were unable to find any firearms or weapons permits under Nancy Lanza's name. Huh. Odd. Now he says, going back to the tattooed couple, I believe, and this requires a lot of assumptions, that perhaps this couple took Nancy hostage, or maybe it began with Adam, who then told them where Nancy was. The BMW was on the search warrant. Someone was camping in the woods by where they live. Adam did, quote, bump his head. So maybe something very weird happened in the days leading up to this event that is completely different from the official story. Now, this comes from a trove of documents that was released regarding the investigation into the event. And this is an email from a couple who talked to FBI agents, immediately after what happened. And they must be people that lived close to the Lanzas. So the email's dated December 16, 2012. This would have just been 2 days after the event. It is addressed to a special agent whose name is redacted. And the email says, "We live a redacted in Sandy Hook, redacted. You and your partner visited our house Friday evening. We didn't have much of value to tell you, I'm afraid. This afternoon, my wife and I were taking our weekly hike in the state forest adjacent to the neighborhood and thought of something to pass on to you. Approximately 1.5 miles from our house, in a remote part of the woods, is a large tent and other items that appear to have been there for quite some time. We first noticed it last weekend when we took an unmarked trail we'd never hiked. It didn't occur to us to mention it to you on Friday evening, but we thought about it today. I'm attaching a photo I took of the campsite." And then he adds, "In addition, my wife remembers seeing a man in the woods in the same general vicinity as the tent with a gun on Thursday, December 13th, around 1 p.m. So that's literally the day before the event. He says this was likely a hunter, but she wanted to inform you about this. It's likely that this is nothing, but that's for you to decide." So somebody was camping out in the woods in the Lanza's neighborhood. This is a picture of the campsite. Obviously, it's a black and white scan, so it's kind of hard to see any detail. And then this is the story about Adam getting bumped on the head just a couple days before this happened. At around 5:30 a.m. on December 10, 4 days before the event, Nancy told a friend that Adam had bumped his head badly. So maybe something else happened that caused his head to be injured. He says, then there is the DNA supplemental report. The issue with that, which is the fact that neither Adam nor Nancy's DNA was found on the 22, but the DNA of a convicted felon was. So this comes from the supplemental DNA report. The results eliminate Nancy and Adam as the source of the DNA profiles from the following item, right? Swabbing the handle area of the rifle and exterior of the car door. Now, this is another part of that. Number 5, the results eliminate Nancy and Adam Lanza as the source of the DNA from some envelope and adhesive of a stamp and the .22 caliber cartridges. Nancy and Adam eliminated as contributors to the DNA profiles from the trigger of the rifle, the pistol grip of the rifle, shoulder stock of the rifle, cartridge chambered round. So, the side area of the magazine. So none of their DNA is pinging on this. Now we get to number 7. The DNA profiles from items 3G1 swapping both sides of an envelope and .22 caliber cartridges were searched against the Connecticut and national DNA databases. This is where it gets interesting. On January 7, 2013, a hit was obtained with the convicted offender DNA profile from New York State Police Investigation Center. Keep that in mind. DNA hit, New York convicted felon, because that's going to come up again later. No matching profiles were found from another item. These profiles results will be searched periodically. If another suspect is developed, please notify the examiner as soon as possible. So that's very strange that that neither the mom nor Adam Lanza's DNA is pinging on any of this stuff, but it is a convicted felon from New York who shows up on some of these items. It's very strange. The Honda didn't move for a very long time. This comes from, again, documents that were released from the investigation. Now, there's a lot of redactions here, so I'm just going to read around that. Adam never completely accepted that he had a disease and therefore never took any of his medication he was prescribed. Adam was in complete denial of his disease from diagnosis and therefore was not on disability because of this denial. Adam was a member of the Tech Club, but never was able to maintain any of the relationships he established there. Adam never had got in trouble at school or with the police, nor did he demonstrate any violent tendencies as far as it comes to harming animals, getting into fights, things that you might expect to see with somebody who goes on to do a mass eating. November 2012, Nancy asks somebody, I'm assuming it's Adam's father, to chip in for buying Adam a computer or parts for a computer for Adam to build himself. They summarize the reasons why Nancy wanted to do this, as Adam had become kind of a shut-in and hadn't gone anywhere in 3 months. His battery in his car is dead because it's been sitting there for so long. So that's kind of the part that he wanted you to hone in on, that the car battery was dead. The car had been sitting there for some time. His hobbies would vary over the course of time because he would find one thing he was interested in. He would be very, excited about it. And then after a few months, he'd move on to the next thing. Some of his hobbies included building computers, online gaming, writing, poetry, hiking, and going shooting. Some of the walks he would take would be around the Sandy Hook Elementary School. He loved this school, the person says, and he liked to visit. Somebody took Adam to the range once or twice. This part is redacted. And they only knew of him having 2 rifles, 1 black single-barrel shotgun and 1 black large-caliber rifle. They never knew he owned any pistols or other rifles, but do remember Nancy taking him to pistol safety courses so he could fire guns at the local range. They don't know how or why Adam became involved in firearms as a hobby. Now, we have another report, investigative report, with again heavy redactions, so I will read around those. Redacted related, he'd been expecting to be contacted by police at some point in light of recent events in Newtown. Now, I'm going to venture to guess that I believe this is Berquist, the gentleman that Nancy Lanza may have been in a romantic relationship with. He was initially guarded during discussions related to redacted. He described that it was redacted and that Nancy was as well as sharing regarding redacted. I explained to redacted that our investigation was active and as such we were not releasing such information and related statements by witnesses to the media. So he was concerned about the media obtaining information he was sharing about Nancy, basically. Redacted further related that he redacted that she went on a trip to New Hampshire Tuesday, December 11th. He left for a business trip on Wednesday, December 12th. He received a text message from Nancy at approximately 2200 hours on December 13, in which Nancy informed him she had recently arrived home. They last talked on December 13th at approximately 2200 hours. At that time, he was in redacted and they discussed her trip and his business trip. Now, I don't understand why that information needs to be redacted of like where this guy was traveling to. It's all very strange. Redacted thereafter texted Nancy Friday morning. This would have been the morning of the event at approximately 10-12 hours to say good morning. He did not immediately or shortly thereafter receive any response from Nancy, which he described as not being unusual. And I'm going to say, look, they were in a relationship. If he's texting her to say good morning, let's be real. Later that day, his boss notified him of the shooting in Newtown, and he searched the topic online and contacted family members to make inquiries. He then attempted to contact Nancy on both her home phone and cell phone just around noon with negative results. He described Nancy's home telephone didn't even ring and went directly to voicemail. Sometime thereafter, he heard the name Ryan Lanza being talked about in connection with the event, as well as the incident taking place at Yogananda Street. At this point, he called a friend who confirmed Nancy's passing. He related he never thought Nancy's son Ryan would be involved in such an incident. He was aware Nancy had another son, Adam, who suffered from Asperger's syndrome. He said he never met Adam and had only been inside Nancy's residence once, approximately a year and a half ago, that Nancy never related any incidents in which Adam was violent with her. However, he felt that Nancy did a lot for Adam to assure him that he was happy and appeased. And he related that during the time he'd known Nancy, she had shared with him that she owned firearms and had been to the range to do target shooting with her sons. In addition to the information contained in a redacted statement, he verbally related to these detectives that over the past year, Nancy shared with him her plans to sell the house in Newtown, Connecticut, and move to either Washington or North Carolina. So that's interesting. And then this is just another report, again, heavily redacted to the point of being pretty much useless. Just saying that these two individuals were not home on the morning of the 14th. They did not notice any suspicious activity in their neighborhood within the past few weeks, but there is some redactions here, and they advise they'd be willing to cooperate further as deemed necessary. So he speculates that maybe this couple that she happened to meet in New Hampshire, maybe they were involved in some not good things, right? And maybe somehow Nancy and Adam got caught up in this. So he speculates that maybe they off Nancy and drag Adam in the car, which would track the car's movements was a GPS, not the actual car. Adam, somewhere in the process, grabs Ryan's ID. Why did he do that? Why did he bring his brother's ID? Was that so that they wouldn't have the address to his home? They drag Adam out of the car upon arrival, gain entry to the school, off Dawn, and once Vicky won't say who's witness X, this is the person perhaps they were looking for, they disposed of Adam and other people and flee in a purple van. Now, this is very interesting. This comes from some of the audio that was released of the 911 calls, and it's at 9:45 a.m. It's very strange.
Danbury's reporting a possible vehicle, a purple van, 2 occupants with a possible ski mask that may be involved in this incident. Exit 8 heading down Stony Hill towards the center.
So 2 individuals in a purple van, one of who may be wearing a ski mask. Odd. And it continues.
Involved in this incident. Also, we're getting reports of one of them may be wearing a nun outfit. Heading towards Danbury, Stony Hill. Purple van, unknown plate.
Purple van, one of them may be wearing a nun's outfit. So keep in mind purple van, because that will be important later. It's probably a combination of this. Adam was targeted, it appears. Maybe these people were his accomplices. Remember, there were 2 jackets by the Honda and all the doors were open. So that's the other suspicious thing. Who did those jackets belong to? This was something that was documented by a researcher who was in the area, documenting a humming noise that was heard in the area prior to this. To the investigators of Newtown tragedy, neighborhood infrasonic hum environmental stressor. So this individual relates, for over 3 years, Western Connecticut has been inundated with a bewildering low-frequency noise and vibration problem that most are unaware of and certainly being overlooked by many. Besides my own personal issues with it, my wide-encompassing research to bring attention to the problem suggests far greater reaching consequences than just an annoyance. The problem is caused by infrasonic low-frequency noise, sound waves creating various conditions inside dwellings that at times make those sensitized to it to become distressed both mentally and physically. The problem is known as the hum, and my research validates its occurrence in Connecticut as well as locations throughout the nation. I started sensing it in late 2009 and documented a growing number of others as well in Connecticut and across the nation. I need to bring your attention to data from Lanza's neighborhood I collected in that area September 2010, used to understand the extent of where the hum is occurring. This data was included in an information package to FERC that he sent December 12, 2010. Additionally, I notified FERC on December 6 and 12, 2012, of increases of horrendous low-frequency hum for the days prior to the tragedy. The location and intensities I observed in that neighborhood, as well as certain actions of Lanza brought out in the media, raise concerns that researchers have greater unappreciated the disastrous effects of long-term exposure to these types of conditions on sensitive people, basically. So this was significant research of the Lanza home. Sound profile measurements on September 24, 2010 from visiting 3 locations near Lanza's neighborhood in Newtown. Cale Davis, Osborne Hill, and Pawcatuck, Route 34 roads. On January 20th, 2013, these conditions were reconfirmed occurring on surrounding streets. December 6 and 12, 2012, email complaint notifications to FERC of horrendous low-frequency hum for these periods. Location of ROW to the Lanza home is less than 1,500 feet. Testing tone in 2010 and random visits to the area and others since then prove the occurrence of the hum in this neighborhood is as intense as in Brookfield. This means that since September 2009, this neighborhood has been exposed to the same horrendous conditions as my neighborhood and home, as well as many other locations surveyed. Remembering the tragedy, my visit there in September 2010, I realized data may be important to the investigative team that they might not be considering. One can see the hum was occurring in that neighborhood for over 2 years prior to the tragedy. One can also see the week before December 14, the hum intensity was horrendous in Brookfield, which is indicative of Lanza's neighborhood. One can see the home's location is close to the studied gas system lines. One can see it is still active in our neighborhoods. The school was very secure, and all of the oddities of the school being a hoax could be that for a witness protection program. So this is very interesting. This is a school CCTV system passes with flying colors. So obviously there was some type of security system at the school and video. And I remember, and I've not been able to find any video of this since, but I'm interested to know if you guys listening remember seeing. I remember seeing CCTV footage of Lanza dressed in all black, entering, like walking in the school, somewhere in the school. I remember seeing that footage, and now I'm being told it doesn't exist, that there just wasn't any CCTV footage. But I have a distinct memory from 2012 of seeing on news reports this clip of him, and he's in all black and he looks very small. I think he was 112 pounds when this happened, and he had like a rifle slung over him. I remember seeing it. Does anybody else remember seeing this? And so, by the way, the guy who did the security system, a gentleman named Richard Novia, keep that name in mind. He is going to come up later. Imagine they let someone in the program get away from them and take down a school that has other witness protection kids. Well, they couldn't come out and do national coverage, interviews, because they'd revealed their identity and location. Could this explain all of the bizarre behavior of the families and even the medical examiner? It's all very strange. And listen to this: lives in hiding. It has been right in front of your face the whole time. This Sandy Hook father lives in hiding, And when they did an interview with one of the other parents, they literally put him in a complete disguise, which is insane to me that that would be necessary. And yet, here we are. And so he's got another little thread here, what I believe actually happened, another thread. He says, I've had threads on how the timeline is impossible in the official timeline, but I suppose I've never actually stated what I believe happened that day. So here goes nothing. After whoever unalived Nancy 4 times in the face, left 36 Yogananda Street and went to the back of the school. There, in the back of the school, a chain was cut and placed back to conceal their entry. So, the official story is he drove up to the front of the school in the Honda. And again, there's multiple jackets on the ground. All of the doors of the car were open. So it seems like it would be more than one person, right? And what about what was found at the back of the school? A black glove pouch that resembled law enforcement's was found. A gunman was dropped off. This is very strange. So this comes from the investigation report. While still in the wood line, a vehicle, Connecticut registration, that's redacted, was seen driving down Crestwood Road. This trooper and Officer Williams stopped the vehicle. It was operated by redacted. Redacted stated that he had 2 children in the building and was looking for a way to locate them. He stated he was unable to get to the firehouse and trying to find a different way around. A second vehicle was stopped on Crestwood. This vehicle was operated by redacted. The front seat passenger was redacted. They stated they had a child at the school and could not get to the firehouse and were looking for a different way. This trooper and Officer Williams assumed a security post between number 5 and 8 Crestwood Drive at the area of the rear gate to the playground at the school. The gate had a lock and chain that was cut with the chain reattached to the gate. The cut link was found on the ground near the gate. Also on the ground was a black pouch that resembled a glove pouch issued to law enforcement personnel. At 14:23 hours, this trooper and Officer Williams were relieved of our security post by Newtown Police. Officer Smith, number 92, and Seabrook, number 95, they were made aware of the cut chain and the pouch on the ground. I explained to them that the cut chain looked suspicious and no one could account for the black pouch on the ground. The case remains open. So that's very bizarre. It's strange. This is also supported by the fact that when the shooting officially started, just minutes before parents signed out, they saw nothing suspicious, which is impossible unless the Honda didn't get there yet, right? They started around back. That's what it sounds like. So you can see here, this is one of the parents at 9:32 sign-in sheet. And at 9:32 in the morning, they see nothing suspicious, and the shooting begins just a few minutes after that. So this is from an investigative report and an interview that was conducted of a person who is redacted. I was assigned to make contact with a redacted. Name was listed on the visitor sign-in, sign-out sheet for the school. According to the visitor log, they signed in at 9:31 and signed out 1 minute later. On January 7, 2013, at approximately 12:30 hours, I interviewed Redacted via the phone. Redacted verbally stated to me that on December 14th, she went to the elementary school to drop off a letter Redacted had forgotten at home. The letter was addressed to Redacted. It was to apologize for cheating on a test. Redacted stated when she pulled into the parking lot, she did not notice anything unusual. She said that there was no passing cars that was coming in or out. She went to sign into the office. She stated there were a couple of parents walking around because there was a gingerbread house building activity going on inside the school, and that parents were there to help out and participate. That's another interesting thing that I've never really heard mentioned much. She dropped off the letter and went back and signed out. So that's fascinating. Maybe it wasn't a gunman. Maybe it was someone who was aware that this event was about to happen, like the man in the woods who was dropped off at the rear. Salon in the Newtown Bee said it was an off-duty tactical officer with a firearm which begs the question of how the F, right? There was another man in the woods. Eyewitnesses saw a second man in the woods, so more than one in the woods, wearing camouflage pants and a dark jacket, and said that he may have been armed. Must be a second shooter. And they claim actually he was an off duty tactical squad police officer from another town who just heard things happening and happened to just rush over there and be in the woods at the time armed. Sure thing. I mean, that just sounds ridiculous. That will be important later. So someone dropped off around back. They cut through this gate. They drop a pouch on the floor that resembles something law enforcement would have. They get into the school and gain entry. They take off. Yes, they were working with two people at the front and one already at the back of the school. They take off their jackets, load up, and blow out the window of the school. This would not include Adam. And you can see here again, this is the Honda. There's multiple jackets here, so from more than one person. Very bizarre. Lanza never stepped on any glass, so this is from his shoe. As you can see, there's no glass there. There's no little cuts or anything like that. Hawksprung and Sherlock may have come running out and are immediately offed upon opening the door to room 9. Hammond catches a bullet to the leg, and the teacher in room 1, all the way at the end of the hallway, catches a stray to the foot. This was done by a man in a mask. So there, it seems like there had to have been more than one person there. Because again, these events are happening around the same time in different parts of the school. She stated that as she exited the room, she heard gunshots and then saw Hawksprung and Sherlock fall down in front of her. She stated that she felt a gunshot hit her leg and felt a burning, warming feeling in her lower leg. She described the gunman as a male about 5'11" tall, wearing a dark hat and mask. Hammond stated once this happened, she fell down and laid still in the hallway. She said that he remained on the floor for approximately 10 seconds, then looked down the hall toward the main office. She stated she didn't see him in the hall, so she crawled back into room number 9 and held the door closed. She stated she heard hundreds of rounds. She estimated they were 10 to 15 round bursts that she could hear what she believed to be reloading in between. She estimated she heard 7 to 8 breaks in the shooting, which she believed the gunman was reloading. At approximately 11:26 hours, I seized Hammond's shoes and socks, which had a bullet hole in the top of the toes of the left shoe. While this is happening, Ms. Roig sees Miss Rousseau panicking, trying to find her emergency keys. They were not there. Who knew about the emergency key? There's so many weird aspects to this. Who knew to take them in advance, right? Lawyer, classroom keys were missing on day of Sandy Hook massacre. A lawyer for the parents of 2 children unalived in the 2012 Newtown school tragedy says emergency folders kept in 2 classrooms where victims were slain did not contain keys that could have been used to lock the room's doors. Yeah, that's suspicious. And do you guys remember we were initially told that Adam's mother, Nancy, was a teacher at the school? Then it changed to, oh, she volunteered at the school. None of that is true. Where did that information come from? Who was putting out that disinformation that early? We know what happens next. For some reason, 9 kids were able to flee Miss Soto's classroom, while everyone but one sole survivor walked out of Miss Rousseau's class. Responding officers unalive the gunman, blowing the back of his head off. So you can see right here, male walked into elementary school and yeeted kids and faculty member. Male was fatally wounded by police on scene. This is again contradictory to the official story that Adam Lanza unalived himself. There are some anomalous bullet fragments from the 10mm in room 10. Remember, officially, he only fired this once. I believe the school was either some sort of like witness protection program or that the gunmen were looking for a single target. Maybe they were firing off rounds to try to get people to talk and to name this person that they appeared to have been looking for. There were live shotgun shells found in the school, and the Saiga 12 gauge was illegal and had victims' DNA on it. Was left at the passenger side of the door that could have ambushed responding officers. So that's all very strange. Two of the items examined outside the building of the school, one from the shotgun in the shooter's car, and a second from 36 Yogananda Street, yielded DNA profiles consistent with the profiles of two victims. Very weird. It is strongly believed this resulted from an accidental transference. There is no reason to believe that the victim would have come in contact with these items, especially at the house. The one at the house, that was used, that makes no sense. Did you notice this? A shotgun shell was found in room 4. That would be way further down the hallway, as can be seen here. So something really weird is going on. Gunman loaded it, walking past room 4, ejecting a live shell, just like Adam. Shotgun man enters room 8, while quote-unquote Adam enters room 10. Remember the man in the woods. In the chaos of the shooting, he puts a bullet in the back of Adam's head. Look at the holes. These are not entrance holes. Either the man in the woods yeets Adam or responding law enforcement. Pretty good reason to redact the entire dash cam footage, right? Shotgun man is either the man in the woods or is the additional gunman who was unalived on scene with blonde, wispy hair. That's very obviously not Lanza. He did not have blonde, wispy hair. So this is coming from an investigative report. I yelled that it was an unsecure scene and that they needed to find safety and get back in their cars. Officer Chapman brought the girl into an ambulance, and I got a ride back to the front of the school by a Sandy Hook Fire Company golf cart. As I was nearing the school, I noticed a state police sergeant, later identified as William Cario, carrying the body of a young boy out of the school and placing it on the ground. He was asking, "Where are the ambulances?" Sergeant Cario asked if anyone had a vehicle. I told him to put the child into my Ford Explorer, which was still parked at the front of the school. I opened the tailgate, and Sergeant Cario put the child in the back and hopped in with him. I drove them to the back part of the firehouse again, where a second ambulance was arriving. It was my impression the ambulance workers had no idea what was going on. One of them asked what we had. I told her I had a child with redacted. She asked me if we needed more ambulances. I told her yes. I went to the back of my car and saw the child lying there. So he continues, I re-entered the school from the front door with Sergeant Cario, and we walked down the front corridor, checking the front classrooms. In one classroom, I noticed a young male lying on his right side in a fetal position. His body was about 3 feet in from the door to the left. Someone yelled out that he was the suspected shooter. It appeared he had his hands cuffed behind his back. Very strange. I noticed a large pool of blood spreading from the right side of the suspect's head. I asked who had unalived him, as I did not remember hearing any shots since my initial arrival at the school. Someone behind me stated he had done it himself. Oh, with his hands cuffed behind his back. The suspect had long, blondish, wispy hair and a very straight and pronounced jawline. What? The left side of his face did not appear to have injuries. He appeared to be about 19 years of age, but seemed very small. He appeared to have the body size of a 12-year-old. To the best of my recollection, he was wearing a t-shirt and green tactical vest. I believe he had green or black pants on. He was wearing a plastic thigh holster on his left leg. The holster appeared to have an automatic handgun in it. I noticed a black Glock automatic pistol 1 foot away from the suspect. It was my belief at that time that he shot himself with this weapon. Oh yeah, with his hands cuffed behind his... This is so bizarre. Driver freaks out and flees. Maybe the accomplices are leaving, right? Possible purple van occupied with 2 individuals with mask and nun outfit heading down Stony Hill, possibly involved in the incident per Danbury PD. The man in the woods happened to be from New York, and there was a New York felon's DNA on the .22 Savage. Huh. A man from New York who was working in a nearby town went to the school after an application on his cell phone alerted him to the situation. He drove to the firehouse and went up to the school on foot. He was taken from the scene of the school in handcuffs and later to the Newtown PD. It was determined that he did not have a connection to the school and he had just gone to see what was going on. Right, right. Sure would be nice if we could talk to him. Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? So these are aerial images, and this is something very interesting from the investigative report. It is mentioned, we're not going to read the whole thing, but they're talking about an informant, right? In coordinating obtaining cell phones from the providers of cell phones lost in the incident by teachers, Redacted and Caitlin Rogue. So these are two of the teachers, and one of them is apparently an identity of a confidential informant or witness. So it is not crazy to think that maybe there was some kind of somebody at this school was in witness protection and there was some kind of why did they have an informant, a confidential informant? I was able to determine that redacted carrier was Verizon for redacted. And why is this person's name redacted but not the other teacher? Well, obviously there's something weird going on. Both had been deactivated. I contacted Apple Security, was able to reach a representative, and I redacted and assured him of the efforts by Apple to provide her with a new phone. On December 31st, 2012, final email contact was made with Apple Security. So this is interesting. What is going on here with this? It's all very strange. And then to close it out, there's more strangeness. There is an uneven cobblestone staircase near a bridge at the corner of Washington Avenue and Churchill Road below the small collection of shops and dinettes that passes for a downtown in Sandy Hook. The staircase leads down to a tiny clearing near a stand of leafless maple trees. A wooden bench is there so visitors can listen to the gentle sustrations of Putatuck River and watch fishermen cast their lines. A small wooden sign jammed into the ground says this oasis is called the Glen. It is New England idyllic. In the day after the shooting, if you were sitting on that bench, you could see a cryptic message painted on the support wall below the bridge that read, quote, "We have everything, and we have nothing. Small and unstable, we self-destruct. We are sleeping sheep, and there are wolves among us." Very bizarre. This is an actual picture from the day after the event of the spray paint on that support wall. Very odd message there. Members and associates of WS Group charged with making grenades, selling guns, and that group would actually be called the White Wolves. Very, very weird. There are wolves among us. Huh. Odd. And so that's just, those are two of these threads so far. He says also that apparently Adam Lanza had made a web page where he was talking about the occult and the devil. This is according to a friend. And he also notes that there is a Warren's Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, only 15 minutes from Sandy Hook, and that Newtown had a reputation as a Satanist hub. Very strange. I Am the Devil, former classmate reveals school gunman had online devil worshipping page as childhood barber recounts how he didn't speak and just stared at the floors. Yeah, the guy who cut his hair, his mom would bring him in to get haircuts, and even when they would ask him questions or speak to him, he would not respond, and his mom had to come over and say, "Okay, Adam, it's time to go," and then he would respond. Very strange. This is about the 15 minutes from where that occult museum was and Newtown. And then apparently there's this article, Newtown has a reputation as a Satanist hub. Very bizarre. Apparently 45% of local respondents to a survey heard of satanic cult activity in the area. And he is posting that in response to this. Apparently, I didn't know this, but the Adam Lanza came from an organized mob family whose restaurant was featured in Woody Allen and Robert De Niro movies. Very strange. It is also strange the movie shot in Lanza's familial restaurant, a restaurant frequented by the mob, features the devil. Yeah. This is the restaurant. There's a picture of, this is Adam's mom eating at the restaurant back in the day. I don't know what to make of this. Being the shooter, mentor, hoaxers, and targets all seem to have the fix. It could point to the answer. This is apparently old archive footage, New York City, of the restaurant and the mob. Interesting that shortly after Doreen's disappearance, her mother Donna retained a private investigator, Richard Novia, who later went on to be the Newtown School District Director of Security. Remember, this is the guy who taught the tech club where Adam Lanza was a member. There's a famous Polaroid of children bound and gagged found in 1989 in Port St. Joe, Florida, which is widely claimed to depict Tara Calico, but might actually show Doreen Vincent instead, something that would indicate she was trafficked. So there's some weird stuff going on here. One of the people who was a prominent individual covering this case, Wolfgang Halbig, apparently has a lot of red flags in his background. He has flagrantly lied about most of his backstory and appears to be a spook. Yeah, that's lovely. Child trafficking, a coven of elite satanic programmers, informants. Why? Who? Yeah, very odd. Peter Lanza obituary. This is the grandfather, I guess. Born and raised in Haverhill. Attended local school. This is the Lanza Italian restaurant that is featured in the Woody Allen and Robert De Niro films. Again, it's all very weird, very suspicious. He says, since I'm being tagged, this is in response to someone else. He says, did you know in the aftermath of Sandy Hook, federal authorities were investigating the use of stolen firearms? Stranger still, there were reports of a purple van with masked assailants and nuns, almost exactly like what was reported of a known NN method of a getaway vehicle a few months before. So there was an event that happened a few months before this in a different state at a Sikh temple. It's all very strange. Even weirder, Miss Soto's high school friend Jessica Zralik's brother Kenneth headed the local NN movement in Connecticut, the Connecticut White Wolves, or Battalion 14, who were federally indicted for weapons and explosives on 3/22. So this is an incident report. Redacted, contacted by the Newtown, Connecticut Police Division, who requested immediate assistance with an active shooter, had gained entry to Sandy Hook and opened fire, resulting in the death of, etc. It says the shooter was identified as Adam Lanza, residence, address 36 Yogananda Street, Newtown, Connecticut. He passed away at the scene with an apparent self-inflicted wound to the head. New Haven subsequently opened a case to support the investigation investigation of the following violations: aiding and abetting in conspiracy, unlawful for individual to possess firearm that has moved in interstate commerce, discharging in a school zone, and stolen guns. Have you ever heard anything about this in connection with Sandy Hook? No, you haven't. They don't talk about it. We remember this possible purple van, 2 people inside with mask and nun outfit heading down Stony Hill, possibly involved in this incident. Now, going to a different incident that happened a couple months before. This is fascinating. There was a shooting at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin. A purple car or taxi cab with 4 doors pulled into the parking lot. And these are the people who, yeah, purple vehicle. Huh. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So what is going on here? It seems all very suspicious, all very weird. Now, he talks about Colorado Gladio comes to Connecticut. There could even be a connection to Columbine. You can't make it up even if you wanted to. On August 5th, 2012, just a few months before Sandy Hook would happen, a gentleman named Wade Michael Page opened fire in Oak Creek, Wisconsin at a Sikh temple. He fatally unalived 6 people and wounded 4 others and then took his own life. He was a military veteran. Democracy Now! First reported he served in psychological operations and was stationed out of Fort Bliss and Fort Bragg. Make it up. You cannot. This is so outrageous. It's so weird. We've talked about the weirdness that's happened at Fort Bragg. So it just keeps getting weirder and weirder. Wade Michael Page was a 40-year-old Army veteran with links to WS groups and membership in skinhead rock bands. SPLC revealed it had been tracking him for his views, calling him a frustrated NN who had been the leader of a band that they didn't like. In the Army, Page worked in psychological operations, was stationed at Fort Bliss and Fort Bragg. He was a member of the Western Hammerskins and allegedly Volks Front, so that's also interesting. Page became a full or patched member of the Hammerskin chapter last October, appeared to be rising quickly in the organization, according to postings on Crew 38, the online forum for the Hammerskin Nation. And you can see him photographed here with a group of his compatriots, all very strange. Investigators believe he may have been providing funding to groups that were planning to carry out DT attacks. Did I mention that he's from Littletown? He was even arrested there in 1999 for drunk driving. Oh my God. Literally from the same town of Columbine. Page was discharged from the Army in 1998 after serving for 6 years because he'd been found drunk driving during military exercises, according to law enforcement. The 40-year-old was later convicted of driving under the influence, drunk driving, a year later in Colorado. Wade also had a hard time keeping any job due to his drinking problem. He was fired from his truck driving job after he was stopped by highway police for a DUI. A truck company confirmed Tuesday to the Associated Press. Do I really need to deep dive into Columbine and the Trenchcoat Mafia connection to WS and Ns? No, obviously anybody who's done even a cursory look at Columbine knows about these connections. It's quite evident and obvious. Wade Michael Page also liked posting on online forums. I wonder if he ever had anything to do with Connecticut and was perhaps a surviving suspect of the Trenchcoat Mafia, who, by the way, Adam Lanza made contact with members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. We know that. Wade Michael Page, who unalived 6 people at the Sikh Temple of Wisconsin in August, was actively using online forums and websites to spread his beliefs in the months before the event. An unsealed FBI search warrant reveals federal agents quickly collected evidence of his connections to WP groups. The documents say Page, who played guitar and sang, became increasingly interested in conspiracy theories and videos online. So it says here, Connection Police in California are looking for a possible link between Wade Michael Page, who played guitar in a band called End Apathy, and murders that occurred in California. The warrant doesn't say what Page was viewing, but that it disturbed his girlfriend, Misty Cook, who told authorities that Page pushed her to join a WP group in Chicago known as Crew 38. White wolves called homegrown DTs. So they're accused of harassing a neighbor and vandalizing a school and spray painting slurs on buildings, what you might expect from a group of psychological operations, and informants. Now the FBI informant, of course there's an FBI informant, claims members of the Wolves discussed how the unaliving of Barack Obama would help promote a race war during one of their meetings. And this is an article from November of 2010, again in the same area in Connecticut, but this was 2 years before that event. Now we get to this. Adam Lanza's contact online with surviving Trenchcoat Mafia suspects who in turn linked to both military-based traumatic mind control, Smallville, aka Littletown, Colorado, and the Process Church again, and then further link back to the Blade trilogy of films and Matrix trilogy, as well as Goyer's involvement in the film Dark City, dark stuff, much more aligned to Aquino, Colonel Michael Aquino type Luciferian sacrifice than most people want to imagine. That's coming from an article on this. Let's take a moment to look at the similarities between Columbine, Wade Michael Page's attack, and Sandy Hook. All were WSs. All had reports of different and multiple attackers, all supposedly unalived themselves or were unalived by somebody else. Yeah. Investigators have found evidence that Sandy Hook attacker Adam Lanza was obsessed with other mass murderers, a source with knowledge of the investigation said. This news follows an earlier report Lanza may have been motivated by a desire to outdo Anders Breivik, the Norwegian man who unalived 77 people in July 2011, so just a year before the event. And he definitely was obsessed with mass shooters. He still has a Daily Motion account, like his old account you can pull up on Daily Motion, where he has video clips from different movies of these events, okay? And he's very clearly talking about them. He had a Tumblr, multiple Tumblr accounts. One was called Gay for Tim K, Tim K being a German school shooter that is like, this is very weird that he would even know about this person. Queer for Kim Veer, it was another one of his Tumblr accounts, and all of these accounts was glorifying these individuals. Now, coming down here, this is from an FBI report that is heavily redacted. At approximately 10:20 a.m., they saw a man step out of a dark purple vehicle at the Temple driveway. So this is talking about Wade Michael Page. Redacted described the shooter as a bald white male wearing dark sunglasses, a white sleeveless undershirt, and long blue jeans. The shooter had a tattoo that looked like a dragon on his left arm and had tattoos on his other arms and on his head. This is coming from Columbine. Jennifer Small was interviewed on April 28, 1999 by Jill Reutler, Colorado State Patrol at approximately 3:15 p.m. And she relates a story about Eric Harris saying, so they go down to the smoker's pit. This apparently was a thing in the 90s. She wasn't sure what he was wearing, but believed he was wearing a trench coat. Miss Small said she made a remark about how she's having a bad day to the students at the pit, and Eric Harris said something to her to the effect of, not only are you having a bad day, but it's Hitler's birthday. Small said she remembered the remark because Harris didn't usually talk to her, and she thought some of the other students at the smoker's pit may have been Taryn Fleming, Brooks Brown, and Rachel Scott. So these are the weird, connections here to these events. He says, it is my belief that Lanza and others chose this date as a fan of Columbine and Anders Breivik. He chose his own Connecticut 420, basically. This 420 was obviously the day of Columbine. Revenge of the rejection of the German-American Bund's attempt to build N youth camps, which was on December 14th, the 75th year anniversary. And you might say, well, that's really obscure. Why would he do that? Well, like I said, he was very aware of this German mass attacker that was very obscure as well, and he spent a lot of times on these forums. Shocked beyond belief, the new home of Super Columbine RPG discussion forum. And so we have a post here from 2015, Sandy Hook Covenant, Motive, Breivik, Revenge for December 14th, 1937, exploring the links between Lanza and Norway's spree killer Anders Breivik, a man who Adam was fascinated with 100%, sexually attracted to, obviously, and described as motivational, someone who produced an impressive instance of self-actualization in his mind. Also explored as the date of December 14, Lanza was definitely a student of history with very similar beliefs to Breivik and very similar to those of the Columbine shooters, Harris and Klebold, who he also admired. Therefore, I believe Lanza and those who assisted him with the planning and execution of the event specifically chose this date. This was the 75th anniversary of the rejection of the German-American Bund's attempt to build the largest youth camp and training center within the United States, specifically in Southbury, Connecticut, just a short distance from Sandy Hook. The rejection came by vote on December 14th, 1937. Very, very strange. Yeah, very obscure, right? Here are three people that were in Connecticut who were, raising their flags and disrupting another event there. So it's all very weird. Okay, sure, but even if you could connect Wade Michael Page to Lanza, how would you? Revelation of the method. Purple vehicle as the getaway car, purple vehicle at Sandy Hook with two individuals in it, one in a mask, one wearing a nun's outfit. Good luck proving WMP knew anything about the Connecticut White Wolves. Well, here is a video where they're mentioned together. Crew 38 right there. So, yeah, it's all very strange, isn't it? So I think that we're veering into Gladio, PATCON. I think that's quite obvious territory. He says, I finally tracked down the known quote unquote mentor of Adam Lanza's website on the Wayback Machine, Novia Investigations. His about page is fairly interesting. Knowledge and skills in protection of assets, counter surveillance, and interrogation. I've also found his most recent email. So this is definitely bizarre. He says this reads like damn near espionage. This dude had to be Adam's handler and protector. Well, this is the guy that was running the tech club that Adam was part of. Now, moving on to in the vein of Dave McGowan's PTK research. If only you knew how bad things really are. Indeed, indeed. And there is Dave McGowan, rest his soul. He did amazing work. Haven't had a thread in a minute, so this might be clunky. Bear with me. This thread, in the spirit of PTK, will demonstrate Lanza possibly being a subject of mind control. Well, I think that that's pretty obvious. For those who haven't read PTK, you definitely should read it. You can order it online on Amazon. But a common theme throughout the book is dissociative states, people with DID, dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder, pedo stuff, and satanic cults. You have to read the book to really understand the theory, and a lot of these events will start to make more sense. And you find the same connections over and over and over in all of them. To begin, Adam didn't speak until he was much older. He never spoke and would zone out often. His barber thought he couldn't talk, and Richard Novia even said that he would completely shut down. Hairstylist remembers Lanza, I thought he couldn't speak. Nancy's influence on her son was apparent to the stylist who cut his hair. They said Adam never said a word when his mother brought him in for haircuts every few weeks. Like I said, she would have to say, okay, Adam, it's time to leave, because even when they would say, oh, your hair is done, what do you think? He would not respond. Novia said Adam had episodes and would completely withdraw. And coming from PTK, this is the section on Sandy Hook, he says, Lanza wrote, I have images of distorted faces flashing through my mind. Now, so we have a lot of Adam's own writings, okay? I will include a link to an archive of them. You can read the Big Book of Granny. You can read the 25,000 word essay he wrote on basically advocating for pedo stuff. You can read a document he wrote called Selfish in the days before the event, where he's talking about females. He says the word females, and he mentions his mother. It's not like he had much, experience with other women besides her. You can read his writings. And then we recently found, and I wish we would have found this when Dave McGowan was still alive, Adam Lanza's YouTube channel, Cultural Philistine, where you can listen to, there were multiple videos. Of course, it's been taken down, but you can find the audio archives online, where he talks about very clearly that, number one, it was him that did the telephone call talking about Travis the Chimp, which I've done a previous video on. I will link in the video description. And he talks about this essay he wrote for college about pro pedo stuff. So it's obvious that this was his channel. So you can get an understanding for the things he was thinking about. He was definitely an antinatalist. He was into the ephilism, the same stuff that we covered recently with the guy who bombed the IVF clinic in California. They were into ephilism, which is that they were angry that they were even born. And when you listen to Adam Lanza, like, he doesn't sound crazy in any of these audio recordings, but he sounds like somebody who very obviously was traumatized as a child, probably a victim of CSA. And indeed, we find out that his psychologist was later charged for doing things to minors, inappropriate things. So it's like you can see that something was seriously wrong with Lanza. And he himself wrote about being molested, although he would contradict that in one of his videos where he was saying he wasn't a pedo and wasn't involved in that. He was just arguing that they are treated badly by society, essentially. It's very strange. The whole thing is disturbing, and I think it's quite possible that, yeah, he was a victim of this kind of like trauma, mind control, what have you. Lanza wrote, I have images of distorted faces flashing through my mind, noting that the faces are fairly mundane and they sporadically, rapidly appear without any context and then disappear. So that's got to be frightening. Though he referred to them as mundane, they frightened him. He said, I get slightly paranoid over them, and noted that afterwards he had to search his bedroom to make sure no one was there. He referred to these as hallucinations, putting the word in quotation marks as if he wasn't sure that they really were hallucinations. He then went on to describe what apparently was his first significant psychotic episode. He writes, the incident was so surreal that I only remember a small amount of the details. So this isn't even the full thing of what happened. Basically, I began to see, quote unquote, many different things. Although I knew that none of it was actually real, it came as close to being real as it could be for me without it being physically tangible. I heard screaming around me, and I had an overwhelming sense that there was somebody dead behind me. I kept seeing silhouettes of flickering people everywhere. I felt like I had to cry. The entire ordeal persisted for about 15 minutes and sort of faded away. Prior to it happening, I never had that sort of delusional hysteria before. So what induced this episode? And can you imagine, like, for 15 minutes straight, this kid is seeing and hearing things? I mean, that's insane. In this passage, Lanza recorded both auditory and visual hallucinations. His comment that he only remembered a little of the experience indicates that there was much more to it than he reported. His previous experience of seeing faces that caused him to become paranoid apparently were the gradual onset of psychosis that culminated in a dramatic psychotic break. These symptoms, along with his poverty of speech, flattened affect, and other factors discussed earlier, all support a potential diagnosis of schizophrenia. So that's possible, right? Yeah, in the days leading up to the event, the whole town heard a hum, which caused Adam to have visual and auditory hallucinations. A few days before, he bumped his head, quote unquote. Adam was also part of a Yale child study. When Adam was 14, shortly after Ryan left for college, Peter and Nancy took him to Yale's Child Study Center for further diagnosis. The psychiatrist who assessed Adam, Robert King, recorded that he was pale, gaunt, awkward young adolescent standing rigidly with a downcast gaze, declining to shake hands. Kathleen Koenig, a nurse specialist in psychiatry at Yale, gave some follow-up treatment. While seeing her, Adam tried Lexapro, and this had a very negative effect on him, which Fox had prescribed. And Fox, this is, I believe his name was Peter Fox. This was the psychologist who would later be charged for harming minors, if you know what I mean, and we'll get into that. Nancy reported on the third morning of taking Lexapro, he complained of dizziness. By that afternoon, he was disoriented, his speech was disjointed, he couldn't figure out how to open a box of cereal, he was sweating profusely, so much so that it was dripping off of his hands. He said he couldn't think and was practically vegetative. So that is incredibly disturbing. Adam also talked about R quite a bit. In one case, almost verbatim to how James Holmes described it. Holmes also had, interactions with psychologists. This is a common theme in PTK, as you know. So this comes from James Holmes' sanity evaluation. Listed down here, it says Holmes said, if I told them, then I wouldn't be locked up and could not carry out the mission. So he thought he had a mission. Maybe somebody gave it to him. I had to complete it in order to not self-delete. Holmes explained that the mind artist was the psychologist. His anger towards psychology was apparent in the above writing and was consistent with other references made by him during the examinations, and such as the field of mental health had failed him. So he referred to psychologists as mind artists. These psychologists were obviously doing something for him. Now, getting to Lanza, in his anger at culture itself, he viewed culture as the imposition, forced, coercive imposition of values onto people, right? And I understand what he's talking about to an extent, right? He's saying that you're forced to conform from an early age. Your adults put values onto you that you're supposed to just believe are true or what have you. Obviously, he took his contrarianness to the extreme, but I can understand what he's talking about for his hatred for mass culture, for consumerist, materialist nonsense. I get it to a degree. In his view, this is talking about Lanza, growing up in a culture and learning how to function socially is a process of R-ing innocent minds. He stated, the entire philosophy behind education, the brutal indoctrination of pristine minds so as to propagate some delusional system of cultural values. So he really didn't like the education system. He didn't like how he was being indoctrinated in school, and we all are. We all understand that. He referred to children who've been mind effed by culture artists, viewing the imposition of culture onto children as a form of R. He liked to take the word therapist and break it into the artist. And that's so funny to me because I've said that myself, like many times, without knowing that he did that too. It's kind of weird, but like I agree. These people are trained to do that. For example, he writes, therapists are secular priests who assert that they have some truth, and if your values deviate, then you are wrong. Hence the artist. They impose their values onto you through their mind effing. He also referred to the R of civilization, meaning the process of becoming civilized is a form of R. Yeah, he had this like romantic idea of anarcho-primitivism that I think was entirely naive. Though civilization certainly has its attendant ills, Lanza's views were extreme. This issue seemed like an obsession with him, as indicated by the frequency and intensity of his comments on the topic. Absolutely. This was one of his channels here. We are those that are willing to die or yeet to end the mind R of our children. The war for your brain has begun. Incredibly bizarre. Well, Adam was a loner, so no satanic cult stuff, right? Wrong. Allegedly, he ran a Satanist website. Even said he was in Louisiana in the FBI files, allegedly. Very strange. Lanza's worshiping page had the word devil written in red Gothic-style letters against a black background. Trevor L. Todd told the Inquirer something which he said was weird and gave him the chills. The FBI are trying to piece together his smashed-up hard drive to see if his online footprint will reveal any motive for the yeeting, but they strongly believe he made use of devil-worshipping and unaliving sites and boasted of his plans on message forums. Lanza's childhood barber revealed Nancy stopped bringing her son in for haircuts a few years ago, so he thought that they'd moved away from the area. And it's speculation about who did it, but Adam was almost certainly essayed as a child. And, this is in the area, St. Rose, very close to Sandy Hook. Former St. Rose priest arrested in internet sting. That's from 2001. A Connecticut priest working at a Catholic high school was removed from his job Saturday in order to undergo psychiatric treatment after his arrest in a law enforcement sting targeting pederasts. Psychiatrist Paul Fox, who treated Lanza and Waikato patients guilty of SA. Yeah. You couldn't make it up if you wanted to. Also, following PTK thesis, a lot of serial killers like Bundy, Gacy, and Ramirez wanted to be police or in the military and had those kinds of connections. Nancy's brother was a highway trooper who, none other than, trained Nancy with firearms. Also, there's a mention of grand jury material. For what jury? Yeah, I find that interesting. Grand jury material. Lots of redacted stuff there. Nancy had some very odd notes, and Adam's great-grandfather was directly connected to Project Underwood. Was Lanza PTK'd? You tell me. Well, I'd venture to say, yeah. When I met Lanza, he was in no condition to be arrested. What a bizarre thing to say, right? So he says, the first thing, this is again coming from investigative reports, the first thing I observed was a female body lying on the floor in a supine position against the wall adjacent to the main office. The body was surrounded by a quote-unquote pool of blood, which made me realize that a shooting had taken place and or in the process. I checked a nearby bathroom to the right of the main office and cleared it. At that time, multiple other units from state police made entry to the building, as well as officers Chapman and Smith from Newtown PD. We all made our way down the hallway located in the front of the school. As I observed officers Chapman and Smith enter a front classroom together to clear it, I proceeded to the following front classroom. I entered the room by myself and observed one young female, approximately 6 years old, who was alive without any apparent injuries. The young female looked at me and stated, "I'm scared and want to go home." I also observed multiple bodies lying on the ground in the classroom. As I made my way further into the classroom, I saw a bathroom door partially opened with multiple lifeless bodies on top of one another, all with gunshot wounds. The young female was the only one alive in the classroom. I assured her I was there to help her. I told the young female to stay inside the room while I checked to make sure I was able to get her out safely. I went to the first room where officers Chapman and Smith had first entered and observed multiple lifeless bodies lying on the ground, including what I believed to be a suspect who was lying on his right side and appeared to be handcuffed behind his back. The quote-unquote suspect appeared to be a young, white, adult male who had multiple holsters on him and a Glock pistol lying on the ground in front of him with it being jammed or in the lockback position. I also observed the quote-unquote suspect to be wearing earbuds, which I believed them to be green in color. It was my initial belief that Chapman or Smith had unalived the suspect, though I never heard any shots. I then made my way to the back of the classroom and grabbed the young female's left arm. So he's taken the kid out of the school. But you can hear, again, cuffed behind his back. How did he unalive himself? And this was obviously the kid with the wispy blonde hair that we learned about earlier. So it is all very weird. All very strange.
If you look at the intersection, this is for crime in Connecticut in 2012 from the FBI report. If you look at the murder, the first column and under 10 years old, there is the numeral 0.
But this document, unlike the others, provides qualifier.
I missed the word, Dr. Carver.
Provides a qualifier. that this data represents arrest statistics for the year 2012.
Ah, very good, Dr. Carver.
So,
thank you for that.
And when I was,
I had your,
yeah, when I,
yeah.
when I met Adam Lanza, he was in no condition to be arrested.
Very interesting. The police claimed to handcuff him and also described the alleged same body as having different hair colors and styles. Carver directly contradicts most of what the police claim. Yeah, it's all very weird. Lanza had a mentor, Richard J. Novia, who Nancy Lanza insisted never leave Adam's side. As former head of security and an InfraGard employee, InfraGard being an FBI cutout, it makes the relationships that school leaders have seem rather curious. Yeah, because they all have some Fed that they're talking to. It's all really weird. Remember Peyton Gentron in contact with a quote former federal agent? Yeah, that we never got to learn about, never got to learn his name. They all do. I told her Adam was making progress and that taking him out of school could send him in reverse. He had a support network. Without the school, he would fall back into isolation. So she ended up taking him out of school because it was beginning to be too overwhelming for him. He would lose all of his interactions. Everything would be stripped from him and he would get worse. Nancy wouldn't budge. If you are not going to be there, I'm taking him out, Nancy told Novia in a phone call. I don't trust anyone else. Her intense anger at and distrust of the school overwhelmed any arguments to the contrary, and she insisted Adam be taken out of school. She didn't trust anyone else. She had a lot of anger at the school administration. She was very unhappy with the entire district, said Novia. Nancy didn't believe Adam would get the attention he needed without me being there. Why would he not get the attention he needed? This is from his website. He's a licensed private investigator and he has these different professional certifications. He talks about doing surveillance, guard operations, asset protection, threat management, compliance management, emergency management. Very odd. The day the FBI knocked on Lanza's door. That was in response to this post. Extremely memory hold event is how some random 9/11 truther helped bring down the sheriff from the Columbine Yeating investigation for his involvement in a human trafficking ring. This was in 2011, right before social media, where it would be famous, I think. Yeah, more of these connections. They have their exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. Yeah, it's all very weird. He continues, Lanza likely worked with his mother, who he believed that Nancy was an ATF informant, asking in online forums how to convert semi-automatic rifles into fully automatic. Lanza was literally a Fed. His wiki edits aren't even originally his thing. So that's something that Breivik also did as well. They both had Wikipedia pages where they would go and make changes. They would basically edit people talking about other mass eaters. So very strange. Kayan Bread was one of his online personas. As Kayan Bread, Lanza's favorite haunts were mostly gun forums like the High Road, where he displayed an intense curiosity about gun laws and a deep knowledge of weapons and ammunition from the Quran. In one thread on the website, The High Road, in October 2009 at 1 a.m., the poster believed to be Lanza asks whether a ban on a certain semi-automatic pistol might extend to other weapons. Another poster suggests he asked Connecticut State Police. This is the thread in question. In another thread to the same post, Lanza asked for help upgrading an M2 carbine rifle so it could fire fully automatic. Lanza isn't the first mass eater with a Wikipedia pastime. Earlier this year, Norwegian media revealed that Breivik had one also. His edits have yet to be removed. Well, why would you remove it? I mean, it's like literally documenting history. He says, it is harder to find footage of Kenneth Zralik being federally indicted than it is of Adam Lanza. Sandy Hook Covenant rare news clip on Connecticut white wolves. So this was the organization that 2 years earlier were in trouble for making grenades and trafficking in stolen firearms, and may have a connection here to this case. And that's a very interesting point, I believe. There's something very weird about that. He says Lanza did not enter the school through the front window. Who was the confidential informant? Notice the 04 designation that led the police to a rear entry. That's where your gunman entered the school. Why has Alex Jones never mentioned that ever? It's a very good point. If he wants to harp on no blood, there was and he knows it. What about glass? No glass. Yeah, there was definitely blood, but Adam Lanza never stepped on any glass. And here we have identity of confidential informant and witness, never mentioned by any of the Sandy Hook so-called truthers. All 17 pages of Lanza's police background check are completely, fully redacted. Oh my God, what are they trying to hide? He says, why redact any of it? Social security number, etc. Sure, but all 17 pages of it? Why? Wouldn't this help us understand why a lone gunman would yeet 20 children and 7 adults if we understood his criminal history? Did he have a criminal history? Would this have anything to do with 54 pages of Nancy Lanza's ATF documents being completely redacted and given to a grand jury? What grand jury? What are they looking at that we can't? Yeah, it's very, very strange. So he continues here. On February 15th, 2013, TFC Thomas Kiley spoke to Michael English regarding an online account Lanza created through an online storage company called Mediafire. What they found is not stated, but instead of adding it to the record, they chose to delete it. How bizarre, is it not? So here we have from, again, the investigative report, action taken on Friday, February 15, 2013, at approximately 1200 hours. I spoke to attorney Michael English regarding an online account Lanza had created through an online storage company called Mediafire. Based on the content found under Lanza's Mediafire account, investigators concluded that it was best to have the account removed. Therefore, Assistant U.S. Attorney Edward Chang of the United States Attorney's Office drafted a consent form pertaining to said Mediafire account that was subsequently forwarded to me. I explained to Attorney English that we were requesting the consent form be signed by Peter Lanza on behalf of his son Adam. I then emailed Attorney English at menglish blah 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 a consent to assume online identity form, which contained the Mediafire account information. Attorney English advised me he would meet with Peter Lanza as soon as possible and present the form to him. At approximately 15 hours, Attorney Michael English contacted me and advised me Peter signed the form as requested. He then emailed me a copy of the form that was signed. So let's just delete the account. Let's just hide the evidence. And this is the consent form here, which you can see is signed by Peter Lanza, and they redact the Mediafire account's name. Why, of course, would they do that? Since they had no search warrant and apparently stumbled across it, meaning they needed Peter to sign off on it to gain access to it, which he did, and that was that. Deleted. Mass eating of children have privacy. Investigators would agree to hide evidence. How bizarre. Adam Lanza did have cameras and video cameras. It doesn't state what was on the Mediafire account. Online Columbine forums, but if he was stalking teachers, students, casing the building, we know based off of his GPS, he, quote unquote, cased Sandy Hook. What if it was CP harming children, him being harmed? Yeah. Lanza was a pedo who wanted to save kids, new FBI document says. What could they have possibly seen that made them get a lawyer to talk to Peter Lanza in hopes of getting the contents of that account deleted? It's all very good questions. He continues here. The Sandy Hook event was a WS hit at a school who had active confidential informants. The FBI and ATF had their op compromised, and members of the White Wolves discovered Nancy and Adam's identity, hitting the school, who may have had a victim associated with their conviction. That stems back to 2 years prior to the event, which was 2012, so their conviction stemmed from 2010. what would solidify this, if it would ever be possible to find out, is if it in fact is true a victim's parents were associated with the 2010 conviction. And he has a thread here on Nancy being a suspected ATF informant. This also, anyone remember who normally carries out domestic Gladio ops? Nancy and Lanza were, in my opinion, a part of a Connecticut gun walking program. Only possible reason why ATF would seize documents for a grand jury. The Saiga 12 guy was unregistered, and we have Adam in possession of the AR shortly following the 2010 conviction of the White Wolves. Or, being its domestic Gladio, and for darker, more sinister reasons, forces hijacking the Connecticut gun walking program. The ATF, FBI, and InfraGard was running simply had their patsy, Adam, and ran with it, leaving their fingerprints all over it. It's very odd stuff. So he is doing some speculation about Nancy. We know from the photographic evidence and evidence log, if Adam did shoot out the front window, he without question did not go through that window in his size 8 shoes. We also know Ms. Hammond in room 9, one of the few surviving witnesses to see him face to face, said that he was wearing a mask. Lanza didn't wear a mask, so who did she see? Ms. Soto's class was first, then Ms. Rousseau. From their work, it would appear that this was the work of 2 different gunmen, one fumbling around, reloading, all of the children escaping almost, while room 10 was the stuff of nightmares. While this is going on, we have Manfredonia in the front on the phone with 911, running to the rear trying to reach police. Salon originally published a piece saying the man in the woods was an off-duty tactical officer dispelling conspiracies while creating new ones. The teacher from room 12 said the gunman must have stole her phone, so the police started pinging a cell phone that was pinging from the woods. Was this the additional gunman fleeing in a purple van wearing masks dressed as nuns? Interestingly enough, we know Richard Novia was intimately involved with the Lanza family, one of the first people to say that Adam had Asperger's. He just so happened to be employed by InfraGard as a former private investigator. They spy on people on behalf of the FBI. And we know the FBI was issuing subpoenas following the shooting. To whom and concerning what? Does it pertain to the seized redacted documents the ATF took from Nancy Lanza's house? It doesn't. Well, why didn't they present it to a jury? All very interesting things. The gun store that Nancy Lanza bought the AR-15 from, Riverview Gun Sales, was closed down just 6 days after the shooting, resulting in the arrest of a former employee. A spokesperson for the ATF said the agency was involved in enforcement ops in the East Windsor area. You could not make this stuff up if you wanted to. It is so bizarre. And then we also have the what was it? I'm drawing a blank on it, but it was Obama's gun walking thing that he did, Operation Fast and Furious. We had Fast and Furious around the same time. So I don't know, the whole thing is seeming really weird. It's all very strange. So, these are just the articles here. Lanza psychiatrist pleads guilty to SA, and we have one more here. Connecticut jail psychiatrist Paul Fox under psychotherapist patient SA law. On July 10, 2019, the state of Connecticut sentenced psychiatrist Paul Fox to 7 years in jail for the SA of an 18-year-old female patient. The sentence will be suspended after he serves just 18 months. The basis of this was his guilty plea to felony SA in the 2nd degree. Now we get to Adam Lanza. Fox first came to public attention when he was identified as the treating psychiatrist of the teenage Adam Lanza. 5 years later, at age 20, Lanza would go on a rampage, unaliving his mother and then 20 children and 6 adults before apparently unaliving himself while handcuffed and, having blonde hair. State police detectives investigating the tragedy later interviewed former patients of Fox and uncovered SA allegations against the psychiatrist, according to court documents. One of the former patients, an 18-year-old Western Connecticut State University student identified as Jane Doe in court records, had begun seeing Fox in 2011. So this, again, 2011, 2009, the dates of the incidents he was doing this to other people coincide with the time that Adam was seeing him. So she'd been seeing him in 2011 for treatment of depression and an eating disorder. At some point, he began having inappropriate relations with her. Fox was reportedly fired from his position at the counseling center in 2011 for an ethics violation. The woman told investigators about the relationship, saying she was drugged up and out of her mind on a cocktail of prescription drugs Fox prescribed. The inappropriate encounters occurred at his Brookfield office and on a sailboat he kept at Candlewood Lake, documents show. And there's more than that. It is very disturbing stuff. And it's not hard to guess that, this kind of thing maybe happened to Adam Lanza. Maybe that's why he was so angry. Maybe that's part of the reason why he felt it was necessary to unalive children, which he said he was doing to protect them. What happened to him? And just from some of his writings, this is what he himself has written. He said, I was molested at least a dozen times by a few different adults when I was a child. It wasn't my decision at all. I was coerced into it. They felt me all over my body, and it usually culminated in the fondling of my private parts. What do each of the adults have in common? They were doctors, and each of them were sanctioned by my parents to do it. This happens to virtually every child without their input into the matter. Their parents sanction it. So he obviously, I remember reading that he didn't like being touched. And that to me, I always think, yeah, something happened to him as a kid. Someone might say it would be difficult. This is part of his extensive pro-pedo writings that obviously are indicative of somebody who's been through something incredibly traumatic and is trying to, trying to make sense of it, trying to maybe even justify it. Because again, this happens to you when you're a child, you internalize it. He writes, someone might say it would be difficult to find a child who wants to have inappropriate relations with an adult, or that children are happy to be in their current situation and do not want freedom forced onto them. Although I do not believe that to be the case. If that were true, then it would be no different than slaves in the pre-Civil War U.S. believing that their slave owners have bestowed a positive economic benefit upon them, and that they're happy to live the way they are. After all, they receive food and housing in exchange for their obedience. So he was very obviously, something had happened to him that was disturbing, and he was then trying to justify it. So I just wanted to present this information to you. A lot of this stuff I did not know about, hadn't heard of before, hadn't heard other people who have covered this event talk about at all. And I'm interested to know what you guys think of this, and I hope you all have a good day. Whee!